The All-American Ball Player of the Year is an award given out yearly to the top high school football player in the entire nation. This is an award that's been given out since 2000 and is oftentimes considered to be the Heisman Trophy of high school football. In this video, I want to look at all the awards winners from the year 2000 to the year 2010, see how their college and professional football careers panned out. The winner of the 2000 award and the first ever award is running back Kevin Jones. Jones, who's from Western Pennsylvania, surprised many by picking Virginia Tech over Penn State. His college decision was even televised, which was very unusual for the time. Jones was an instant impact player for the Hokies, as he would go on to start throughout the season after an injury to starter Lee Suggs. He would end up rushing for 957 yards and 5 touchdowns. He would largely maintain this momentum throughout his sophomore season, rushing for 871 yards and 9 touchdowns. His junior season is when things would really take off for Jones, as he'd rush for 1,647 yards, which put him at 6th in the entire nation, and 21 touchdowns, which tied him for first in the nation. Jones was also named a Doak Walker finalist, an award given yearly to the top running back in the entire nation. He would declare for the NFL draft following a prolific junior season. He would rush for 3,475 yards on his career at Virginia Tech, which would put him second all-time in program history. Jones would wind up getting drafted 30th overall in the first round of the 2004 NFL Draft by the Detroit Lions. Jones's NFL career got off to a really promising start, as he rushed for 1,000 yards as a rookie for the Detroit Lions, but then a common theme was set in place. That common theme was injuries. He would go on to miss good chunks of the 2006 season due to injuries, and go on to miss the entire 2007 season due to injuries. The Lions would end up cutting him, and he would end up signing a 2-year deal with the Chicago Bears, but would only play in 11 games, rushing for 109 yards throughout his career with the Bears, as he would once again struggle with injuries. Following his 2-year injury-riddled career with the Chicago Bears, Jones would go on to sign with the Hartford Colonials of the UFL, where he once again struggled with injuries, being placed on injury reserve very early in his career with the Colonials, and retiring shortly thereafter. Up next is the 2001 winner, running back Lorenzo Booker. Booker, a native of California, initially committed to Notre Dame, but ended up signing with Florida State over the Irish and USC. Booker played 5 years for Florida State and never rushed for more than 1,000 yards, as the most he ever had in a season was his sophomore season in 2004 with 887 yards. Still, despite not exactly lighting the stat sheet on fire, it is very obvious that Booker was a very talented player who showed flashes of brilliance, and the shining example was in his final career game against UCLA, where he rushed for 91 yards, 2 touchdowns, and also had 5 catches for 117 yards. This would ultimately help Booker land in the NFL, as he'd be drafted in the 3rd round of the 2007 NFL Draft by the Miami Dolphins. Booker's time with the Dolphins, however, was short-lived, as he only played in 7 games for them before being traded to the Philadelphia Eagles following the 2007 season for a 4th-round draft pick. Booker would go on to bounce around the NFL a bit before finally retiring following the 2012 season. He would go on to finish his NFL career with 230 rushing yards, 47 receptions, and 362 yards receiving. Up next is quarterback Chris Leak, who would go on to spend his collegiate career with the Florida Gators. Leak would play a lot for the Gators, as he would take over as a starter midway through his true freshman season and start every game his sophomore, junior, and senior year. Still, it wasn't all sunshine and butterflies for Leak during his career with the Gators. Leak had 3 offensive coordinators in his first 3 years with the Gators, not to mention the fact following his sophomore year, his head coach Ron Zook was fired and Urban Meyer was brought in, bringing a dramatically different offense to the table. It is really difficult for a quarterback to develop when they're constantly learning new offensive schemes and adjusting to new coaches. In 2004, the final year under Ron Zook, Leak would play in 12 games, throwing for 3,197 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. In comparison, the following season, the first year under Meyer, Leak would go on to throw for 2,639 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. Meyer's offense did use the quarterback as a runner a lot, and Leak's stats jumped as he went from having only 2 rushing touchdowns in 2004 to having 6 in 2005. But running wasn't really Leak's game. The following year in 2006, the Gators thought they had their quarterback that was perfect for the Urban Meyer offense. That quarterback wasn't Leak. That quarterback was stud freshman Tim Tebow, and a lot of people thought he was coming in town to take Leak's job. Tebow would not unseat Leak, and Leak would go on to start all 14 games for the Gators, leading them to a national championship. For his part in the win, Leak would be named the Offensive Player of the Game in the national title game. Leak left Florida on a very high note, and while he may have not lit the stat sheet on fire, but he definitely left Florida with a legacy. Leak would never play in the NFL and would bounce around some other professional leagues for a couple years before calling it quits following 2012. The next man needs no introduction. That man is the 2004 winner Adrian Peterson. I don't think I need to go super in depth on this guy, as his football career is very well documented. He lived up to every ounce of hype that he had, went on to become one of the greatest running backs of all time. Peterson would go on to attend Oklahoma and hit the ground running as a true freshman, as he'd win Big 12 Offensive Freshman of the Year, and he was named a unanimous All-American. He would go on to battle injuries each of the next 2 years, but that wouldn't affect his NFL draft position, as he ended up getting drafted 7th overall in the 2007 NFL Draft by the Minnesota Vikings. Let's just say Adrian Peterson would go on to have a pretty prolific career in the NFL. He was the NFL's most valuable player in 2012, a 4-time first-team All-Pro player, 7-time Pro Bowler, 3-time NFL rushing leader, NFL All-Decades 2010 team. He was just phenomenal. Up next is the 2004 winner, quarterback Ryan Perrilloux. Perrilloux, who had initially been committed to Texas, the same recruiting class as Colt McCoy, flipped to the home state LSU Tigers on National Signing Day. When he signed with the Tigers, Perrilloux would famously claim that he was going to win the Heisman as a true freshman. When a reporter went back at him and asked him about Jamarcus Russell, the current entrance starter at LSU, Perrilloux replied with, "Jamarcus who?" Well, this didn't go as planned, as Perrilloux would sit behind Jamarcus who and Matt Flynn redshirting in his initial season in 2005. Perrilloux would run into a similar problem in 2006, serving as the third-string quarterback behind the exact same two guys. 2007 was the season in which Jamarcus Russell was finally gone, and Perrilloux had the opportunity to compete for the starting job with Matt Flynn. Flynn would end up being named the starter over Perrilloux, but this wouldn't be the ending of it, as Flynn would struggle with injuries throughout the year, and Perrilloux would end up starting the game against Middle Tennessee, in which he threw for 298 yards and 3 touchdowns, scoring 20 of 25 on passing. This would not be the only game Perrilloux would start in the year, as he'd start in the SEC Championship game against Tennessee, leading them to a victory, going 20 of 30 on passing for 243 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception, while being named the player of the game by CBS. The Tigers would wind up playing in the national championship game against Ohio State. Matt Flynn would, however, be back in time for it and end up starting the game, and Perrilloux would only play briefly in the Tigers' victory. However, following the season, Perrilloux would end up getting kicked off the team for a violation of team rules and end up transferring to Jacksonville State. Perrilloux would go on to play for Jacksonville State for 2 years and go on to have a very solid career statistically, throwing for 5,372 yards with 50 touchdowns, while also rushing for an additional 1,031 and 17 touchdowns. He would go on to briefly appear on the New York Giants roster, but he would never really play in the NFL, would instead bounce around other professional leagues before calling it quits following 2019. Up next is the 2005 winner, quarterback Mitch Mustain. Mustain was an immensely hyped prospect coming out of high school. Some thought he was an even better prospect than Tim Tebow. Heck, he was such a rock star, his hometown of Springdale, Arkansas created a day dedicated towards him. Mustain would go on to sign with the in-state Arkansas Razorbacks, in part due to his head coach at Springdale High, Gus Malzahn, ended up getting the offensive coordinator job with the Razorbacks. Mustain's Arkansas career got off to a pretty good start. He replaced starter Robert Johnson in the fourth quarter in a 50-14 loss against the USC Trojans and instantly put together an 80-yard drive to score against USC. Mustain would be named the starting quarterback for in the game, and the team would find a lot of success with him under center, going 8-0 as a starter, including a 27-10 win against the then number 2 ranked team in the country, the Auburn Tigers. Mustain took on more of a game managerial role during this time, but that's all he really needed to do, as he had the best backfield in the country with Darren McFadden, Peyton Hillis, and Felix Jones. Mustain would, however, experience a change in status, as he'd be benched in favor of quarterback Casey Dick following the first series against the South Carolina Gamecocks. Dick would eventually go on to start the rest of the season, leaving Mustain as the second-string quarterback. Mustain would finish his true freshman season with 894 passing yards with 10 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. Following the season, Gus Malzahn would leave for Tulsa. This, and a combination of Dick returning next year, resulted in Mustain transferring out from Arkansas following the season. He would wind up transferring to USC, the very same team that he had a bit of a coming-out party with early on this season. Mustain would have to sit out the 2007 season due to NCAA transfer rules, but he's ready to rock and roll for the 2008 season. Unfortunately for Mustaine, starting quarterback Mark Sanchez was back, and Mustaine was instead in a battle for the backup job with Aaron Cope, which Cope would end up edging out Mustaine. Mustaine revived to playing in 8 games from the season, going 11 of 16 for 157 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Fortunately for Mustaine, Sanchez elected to forego his final year of collegiate eligibility to declare for the NFL draft, using a quarterback battle with Cope and true freshman Matt Barkley for the successor. Unfortunately for Mustaine, things really wouldn't work out well at all in this quarterback battle, as Barkley would be named the starter, Cope the second stringer, and Mustaine would be relegated to the third string quarterback and would not play a snap behind center the whole year. Following the season, Cope would transfer, and Mustaine would be upgraded to Barkley's backup. Following an injury to Barkley, Mustaine would finally start a game for the Trojans, and this was against arch rival Notre Dame. Mustaine put the Trojans in a position to win before a dropped pass that would have likely resulted in a touchdown happened, and the Trojans would end up losing after Mustaine threw a game-sealing pick. Following this season, Mustaine's collegiate career was over. He finished the season going 41 of 73 for 348 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception, and 1 rushing touchdown. Overall, his collegiate career was a really big disappointment compared to the expectations it had. He would go on to play in a few professional leagues, but overall did not sniff the NFL and even briefly played professional baseball. Up next is the 2006 winner. This is a guy who went by the nickname the Kid with the Golden Arm, and his name is Jimmy Clausen. It wouldn't take long for Clausen to become a starter for the Irish, as following his season opening loss to Georgia Tech, he would be named the starting quarterback. The results, however, weren't exactly great, as Clausen would only win 1 of his first 6 starts at Notre Dame. It would end up going down with an injury, which makes sense because he was sacked 23 times during those 6 games. He would end up missing the next 3 games on the season. Notre Dame would finish the season 3-9, and Clausen would throw for 1,254 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. Clausen would become the full-on starter in 2008, and both he and Notre Dame would see improvements, as Notre Dame would improve their record to 7-6. Clausen would throw for 3,172 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 17 interceptions. Clausen put up a really respectable 2009 season and even appeared on some Heisman watch lists, throwing for 3,722 yards, 28 touchdowns, to only 4 interceptions. Following the year, Notre Dame's head coach Charlie Weis would be fired, and Clausen would declare for the NFL draft for going his final year of collegiate eligibility. Clausen was good, but not great for Notre Dame, and definitely didn't live up to his lofty billing, but it was kind of impossible to, given the sky-high expectations he had. And on top of that, he was plagued by some pretty incompetent coaching at Notre Dame, was on some pretty bad Notre Dame teams that didn't do him much favors. After many thought he could be a first-round pick, Clausen wound up being drafted in the second round, 48th overall of the 2010 NFL Draft by the Carolina Panthers. Matt Moore was the starter for the Panthers coming out of this season, but he wound up getting injured, and Clausen would start 3 games before being pulled in Week 5 and being benched. The Panthers would give up on Clausen pretty fast, as the following draft with the first overall pick, they would start quarterback Cam Newton out of Auburn. Clausen would serve as a backup to Newton for the next few seasons for the Panthers before being waived in 2013. Clausen would spend the rest of his career as a backup who would occasionally start and even started over Jay Cutler briefly in Chicago in 2014 before retiring after the 2015 season. Next up is the 2007 winner, yet another quarterback, this one being Joe Pryor. Pryor had a roller coaster of recruiting process, had actually initially committed to the hometown Pittsburgh Panthers to play basketball. Pryor would later back on this pledge to focus on his Final Four for football: Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State. He would, however, not take a super conventional route, as he would not sign on the February 6th National Signing Day, which traditionally most players signed on, instead announcing his commitment to the Ohio State Buckeyes on March 19th. The Buckeyes, who had been national runner-ups the year previous, had returned the starting quarterback in Todd Beckman. However, after an early season loss to USC, the Buckeyes quickly pivoted to Pryor, with Pryor starting the 4th game of the season against Troy, making his first ever collegiate start. Pryor would go on to start the rest of the season and would show flashes of brilliance throughout his true freshman season, throwing for 1,311 yards to 12 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions, while also rushing for an additional 631 yards and 6 touchdowns. He even had a touchdown reception in the Fiesta Bowl against Texas off a pass from Todd Beckman. Pryor would see even more improvements for the Buckeyes, throwing for 2,094 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions, while also rushing for 779 yards and 7 touchdowns as a sophomore. The Buckeyes would also go on to beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, and win the Rose Bowl, of which Pryor was named the MVP of. In 2010, Pyle would yet again lead the Buckeyes to a win over Michigan, a Big Ten championship, and a victory in a major bowl game, while throwing for 2,772 yards, 27 touchdowns, and rushing for an additional 754 yards and 4 touchdowns. Pyle was going to return to Ohio State for the 2011 season, but then he got caught up in the tattoo scandal and wound up going to the supplementary NFL draft instead. And honestly, I'm biased because I'm an Ohio State fan, but the tattoo scandal was about the stupidest scandals ever. Pyle would get picked up by the Oakland Raiders and would largely serve as a backup until the 2013 season, in which he started 9 of 11 games. And fun fact, he actually has a record for the longest run in NFL history by a quarterback. Pyle wouldn't play too much in the NFL following the 2013 season until he resurfaced again in 2016 with the Cleveland Browns, this time as a wide receiver. And man, he played well, putting up a Pro Bowl caliber season, catching 77 passes for 1,007 yards and 4 touchdowns. Pyle, however, was a bit of a one-hit wonder at wide receiver as he left for Washington the following season. It would not even come close to replicating the same success, and he was out of the NFL by 2019. In 2008, the winner was running back Bryce Brown out of Wichita, Kansas. Brown had a crazy recruitment, and quite frankly, I think it warrants an entire video on its own. But to keep this brief, after a rollercoaster ride, Brown would end up committing to the University of Tennessee. Brown would have a really solid freshman year for the Tennessee Volunteers, running for 460 yards with 3 touchdowns, while also having another 10 receptions for 137 yards and 1 touchdown. However, this was it for his volunteer career, as he would elect to transfer following the year after his head coach Lane Kiffin left to take the same job at USC. Brown would go on to transfer back home to Kansas State, where his older brother linebacker Arthur had also recently transferred to from Miami. Brown would sit out the 2010 year due to NCAA rules, and the following year in 2011, he only briefly played for the Wildcats, carrying the ball 3 times before electing to leave the team and declare for the NFL draft. Brown would go on to get drafted in the 7th round of the NFL draft by the Philadelphia Eagles, and this draft pick was based on potential and potential really only. Brown sure as heck showed that potential, as following an injury to LaShawn McCoy, Brown would go on to start, making his first start since high school, and he'd finish the game with 170 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. He would follow that performance up with another solid performance, rushing for 169 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Dallas Cowboys. Brown, however, was never able to replicate these performances and ended up serving as a backup the following year, busting around the NFL a little bit, serving as a backup before being out of the NFL following the 2015 season. The 2009 winner and the final winner we'll be going over is running back Dylan Baxter. Baxter, like some other players on this list, had a hard time staying out of trouble, and that was truly what his downfall was. Baxter would go on to play at USC and ran for 252 yards and 1 touchdown his debut season as a freshman. This is, however, when things started to spiral for Baxter, as in 2011, after briefly playing for the Trojans, he was kicked off the team. He would transfer to San Diego State, but was kicked off the team before ever even playing in a game. He would end up transferring to Baker University, a small NAIA school, and would end up rushing for 1,025 yards in his one season there. It would actually get some looks from some NFL teams, briefly playing on some practice squads, but overall never made the league and is out of football after 2017. Thank you so much to everybody for watching, and please like and subscribe for more. I've been working really hard on this channel lately.